All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to ask a question that is so fundamental it sits underneath pretty much everything we think and say. It seems so simple, but trust me, it's a real rabbit hole.
I mean, it seems like a question a kid could answer, right? A rock is an object, your phone is an object, case closed. But as we're about to see, when philosophers really start to poke at this question, the easy answers just fall apart.
You know, to get a handle on the world, we have to draw lines, create labels. That's really what metaphysics is all about. This idea of carving reality at its joints. And the very first, most basic cut that philosophers try to make is figuring out what an object even is in the first place. So let's get into it, and we're going to use a classic philosophical tool here. Let's call it the contrast question. If you want to understand what something is, a great place to start is to ask, what is it not? What, if anything, is the opposite of an object? Well, one really simple answer is to say, hey, there's nothing that isn't an object. This is called the umbrella view. The idea is that object is just our catch-all word for, well, everything. Planets, numbers, ideas, historical events, you name it. If it exists, it's an object. End of story. Now, that view is super clean. I'll give it that. But for a lot of philosophers, it just doesn't feel right. It kind of flattens everything out, doesn't it? They'd argue that reality is way more textured than that, and that the category of object is actually doing some important work dividing up the world. And the most classic way to make that first cut is to separate things from the ways those things are. A tree, for example, isn't the same as its tallness. A person isn't identical to their kindness. See the distinction? We've got objects on one side and the properties those objects have on the other. So how do you tell them apart? Well, philosophers had this whole toolkit of criteria. For instance, think about your coffee mug. It's in one specific place, right? But its property, say its blueness, can be in a million places at once. On your mug, on a car, on a painting. Your mug has blueness, but blueness is had by your mug. These little distinctions are what help them sharpen that line. Okay, so we've made our first big cut. We've separated objects from their properties. But oh man, this just opens up an even bigger, even weirder question about what's left. Now, your first reaction is probably something like, I don't know, billions, trillions, a whole lot. But the answers you get from philosophy are, well, they're not what you'd expect at all. The answers range from literally none to, well, let's just take a look. Okay, let's start with the most mind-bending view out there, existence nihilism. This theory claims that, strictly speaking, there are precisely zero objects. That's right, none, nada, zip. For the nihilist, objects are just a convenient illusion, a story our language tells us to make sense of things. Reality isn't made of discrete things, but of features and stuffs. So instead of saying, there's a computer here, a nihilist might say, it is computering here. They're describing an activity happening, not a distinct object doing it. But then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, some philosophers flip the entire script and argue there is exactly one object. This view is called existence monism. For a monist, all the things we see as separate, chairs, planets, people, aren't actually separate at all. We're all just different patterns, different ripples on the surface of one single gigantic cosmic thing. They sometimes call it the blobject. One single reality, one single object. And now, finally, we get to the view that probably sounds a whole lot more sane and familiar to you. This is existence pluralism. It's the straightforward common sense idea that, yep, the world contains lots and lots of different objects. Now, while this feels totally obvious, what's so fascinating is realizing that our common sense view is actually just one of several mind-blowing possibilities on the table. Okay, let's move on to our final cut. So let's just assume for a minute that the pluralists are right, and there are many objects out there. The next question is, what are they actually like? What's going on inside one of them? And the whole debate pretty much boils down to this. Are an object's properties part of it, like ingredients baked into a cake? Or are they totally separate things that are just kind of attached to it, like ornaments on a tree? And this quote from D.M. Armstrong just nails the puzzle perfectly. It feels natural to think that a thing is more than just a list of its adjectives, right? There's the thing itself, and then there are the properties it has. But what is that core thingness? Well, one answer, called bundle theory, says there is no core thingness.
Forget about it. An apple just is a bundle of its properties. You take roundness, redness, sweetness, and so on, you smush them all together in one location, and poof, you've got an apple. If you took all those properties away, there'd be nothing left. But then you get bare particularism, which says, hold on a second. This view argues there is a secret ingredient, a bare particular, or a substratum. The best way to picture it is like a metaphysical pincushion. All the properties, the redness, the roundness, they're the pins, and they're all stuck into this underlying cushion. That cushion is what makes this apple, and not some other identical one.
The relational view is a whole different ballgame. In this picture, the object itself is just a simple, propertyless blob. Seriously, all its properties, like redness, exist out there in the world somewhere, completely separate from it. The object only gets to be red because of a special connection, an invisible string called instantiation, that links the blob to that property.
Okay, after all of this talk about blobjects and bundles and metaphysical pincushions, I know what you might be thinking. You're probably asking, why? Why does any of this matter? And you know what? That is a totally fair question. Here's the thing. It matters because when you question something as basic as an object, you're forced to look under the hood of your own mind. You start to see the invisible scaffolding, the unexamined assumptions that we all use to build our reality every single day. We aren't just learning about the world out there, we're learning about the very structure of thought itself.
So I'll leave you with one last thing to chew on. If an apple really is just a bundle of its properties, and one of those properties is greenness, what happens when it ripens and becomes red? Is it a whole new object? Is it even the same apple? And once you go down that path, well, you really start to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Thanks for joining us.